Kathleen Stewart, what do you think in the pro-metabolic world people are most missing when they start to enter that world and get into that diet sphere?
I think there's a lot. Of talking to many of the people that I've worked with that have come from the pro-metabolic sphere. In general, I'm such a fan of this idea of pro-metabolism, right? That's definitely where I kind of center a lot of my approach to things. So I'll start there. So I'm not against like this idea of, bioenergetics, pro-metabolic, et cetera. But I think the biggest issue is that people have been told the only thing you need to care about is kind of this biochemistry piece. So pretty much just the supplementation and diet. And yes, I think biochem is a great place to start. I mean, we talked about this with the Strong Sisters, right? I think it's a great place to start because, if you do just a small enough thing to kind of get you out of that learned helplessness hole, then from there you can start addressing other things. And I also find that like as your overall energy, for lack of a better term right now, we'll just go with that, as that starts to increase, you can then start to address other things like lifting, for example, so hypertrophy, which I think is hugely important. I know Ray spoke a lot about like concentric exercise and stuff. I do see the need also for the eccentric side of exercise. I don't necessarily agree with only concentrics. I think that can, in the future, maybe we can talk about a little bit more about Gilbert Ling, but like I think you need the entire cycle, right? I also think isometrics are great too. I also think that there's a place for zone 2 and not only concentric zone 2, which would be more of your like cycling and swimming, but like I am a fan of running. I think eventually a normal loosely, right? A healthy person should be able to run a mile like pretty easily. It doesn't have to be fast, but like you should be able to run a mile without being crushed like later that day or the next couple of days, etc. I think we should be able to walk, 8 to 10,000 plus steps sometimes if we need to. So that's the kind of more what I would term biomechanics, movement, functional side of things. I also think that there is the kind of more psycho-emotional side of things that people need to deal with. And again, more energy kind of by approaching the biochem side can help with these other things, but there are pieces to the pie too.
So when you say people are strictly focusing on the biochemistry, yes. What do you mean by that? So
they're just focused on the things I put in my mouth and the supplements I take or the pharmaceuticals I take. They also think there's the biophysics piece that people hit. And so that would be the kind of the sunlight, the, grounding, the red light panels, things like PEMF, all those things. I think people talk about those things too. And I think that's also another piece of the pie. But it seems like most people kind of just focus on the biochem and put a little bit of the biophysics. I would say the biophysics piece more comes from the circadian people, the like quantum biology people, like, all of that stuff. Where from the kind of more pro-metabolic side, they seem to focus mostly on, I would say, the biochem piece with like biophysics as like a loose partner. Yeah.
Do you think that's a correct or a solid starting place though? Starting with the focus on food and nutrition and supplements possibly?
Yeah, like I said in the Strong Sisters podcast, I understand why Ray, people would send him these like very long emails being like, this is my entire history of everything. And he would send them a very short email back and be like, what's your temperature and pulse? Are you getting enough calcium? Are you, what's your vitamin D level, et cetera? And so it was a very kind of like curt email. People took it that way when I don't think he meant that at all. He was just like, look, you need to do something. And we're eating every single day. Most people are taking some type of supplement or medicine. And so that is one little thing that you can move to then start approaching these other things. So yes, I do think it's a great entry point for a lot of people, but I also see that there's other entry points as well. Like there's a lot of people that enter this kind of space from the biomech side. So like, like the training side and like, how do I optimize my diet for training and stuff? Yeah, exactly. So, I think that there could be people that kind of enter more from the like psycho-emotional side, so it kind of just depends on how people are finding people. But I do think that the biochem side is a good kind of first thing, because we need the energy, right? In order to do all these other things. Like we need the energy to be able to lift, to put on muscle. I was bedbound at one time. And so for me at one time, I started with moving fingers. That's all I could do without being crushed the next day, like literally just moving fingers. And then eventually, moving toes, and then eventually like my head, and like, over time building up that capacity. This kind of goes into the whole notion of the post-exercise malaise that is like characteristic of CFSME. But I really had to build that capacity along with building my food. So kind of, again, the biochem side of things, along with building my sunlight, along with like grounding, all of that stuff, in order to get to the place very slowly of where I am now. Yeah.
So I'll read you. And also for anyone listening, I highly recommend going and checking out Kathleen's last 2 episodes with the Strong Sisters. They dive into her whole story. We don't need to rehash all of that, but it's definitely worth listening to. It's a great story, but it's a long one. So we're going to focus on some other things, but definitely worth listening to. So I wanted to read you this quote and hear your thoughts on it and see how you agree or disagree with it from the GOAT quote. Keeping the metabolic rate up is the main thing, and there are lots of ways to do it. Ray Pete. So it sounds like you think people overemphasize the biochemistry, the new nutrition, the supplements, but you kind of think it, and we don't have to interpret Ray here, but all of the things that you mentioned, zone 2, exercise, still revolve around the metabolism, and the thyroid and pulse are still great metrics around that, right?
Right. 100%. Yeah. And Ray was an avid painter. He also talked a lot about psychology, philosophy. He was very learned in many subjects. And I think, when we have more energy, we are more able to do those things. I mean, I think when I work with people, one of the kind of like defining characteristics that someone is truly getting better is now they have, I don't hear from them as much, basically. They have more energy to go live their life, to be with other people, to experience life. They find new hobbies, all of that stuff. And I think those things add in to the energy of life. So it becomes this like positive feedback loop where at the beginning, most people are just frantically searching for the answer. And I understand that I was there, but eventually we kind of move out of that space to where you're now living life. You're not only just focused on yourself, which sometimes we need to be focused on ourselves, but then we can start to be focused on other people. And I think that's where we go to. And then, like I said, it becomes this like snowball effect where those positive things really uplift the energy of, our cellular energy, et cetera. Like there's a really good book, Light and Shaping Life. It's kind of more like a textbook, but it talks about, this is more the kind of biophysics side of things, but it talks about, the light that cells produce and emit, and they're constantly kind of talking to each other, for, again, lack of a better term right now, using infrared, UV, et cetera. And, all of those things that we do external to kind of this like biochem piece impact that and can influence that and stuff. So yes, I would overall agree with the quote. And I think, again, we didn't just see Ray just do biochemistry. He did all of these other things too. So
yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's having a well-rounded approach is necessary.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Like, we have to meet people with where they are, so that's why like if you have someone that comes in kind of more from the lifting biomech side, well, like, you don't want to just be like, wham, I'm going to slam you in biochemistry. It's like, we're going to meet you where you are on this like lifting side of thing, and like slowly over time kind of drip these other things in when people are like able to handle, it's kind of like a judgment call, basically, of like, does it seem like you're ready for this? Mm-hmm. And so, I look at it as like a spiraling Jacob's ladder in a way. Like, we're kind of hitting these things constantly, but we always are constantly returning to them as we like hit them again, as we're going, as our energy is going up over time.
It's kind of like hitting each floor is like a different target, but you're just still moving up.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you start at the bottom, and so if you look at like the circles at the bottom of the ladder, you have like biochem, psycho-emotional, biophysics, biomechanical / like movement type stuff. So you like have all these different pieces. There's probably something I'm missing, but we'll just stay with them for right now. And then as you like are working your way up, you keep going around the circle, but you're at a higher energy level as you're like going around the circle, spiraling upwards, basically. Yeah.
That's a great way to think about it. How would you recommend? Because obviously it's much easier said than done, having a well-balanced approach.
Yes.
Which I remember like not too long ago, I was like, magnesium is the shit. Like everyone needs like 1600 milligrams magnesium. No, I'm exaggerating there, but like, and I was like, it's vital. It's 3700 enzymes, not 300. And, you know, everyone needs to be on. We're all deficient in it. It's not in the water. So it's, how do you recommend avoiding the extremes?
Yeah. So really fast about magnesium. That is like all the rage. It still seems like it. And it definitely was, you know, I would say like 10 years ago or so when I like really started, you know, to get into this and like trying to fix myself and stuff. I will say though, a lot of people do not do well with magnesium. So if you're taking magnesium and it's not even just the type, like, you know, first of all, a lot of people don't do well with like the glycinate types because of like GAD1 issues and stuff. So like going to glutamate. But in general, a lot of people do not do well with magnesium itself. And the reason for that is because magnesium can act as a mild calcium channel blocker. And if you are having issues with your the VGCCs, the voltage-gated calcium channels, and you're having issues with those calcium oscillations, which is needed for everything, like pretty much as far as we know, as far as the literature I've seen, I'm more than happy to be wrong about some of this, but and if I am, please send me more research. But the calcium oscillations are required for everything to be exocytosed from the cell. So all neurotransmitters, all hormones, everything needs those calcium. Every single muscle contraction requires those calcium oscillations. So, you know, like I said, a lot of people do not do well with magnesium at first.
And so what you're saying there is basically that the magnesium can block calcium from exiting and entering the cell, which basically can shut the cell down, at least to some degree, which would obviously result in poorer function, which is not what we're looking for.
Exactly. Like it you know, can mildly block like aldosterone release, insulin release, like, you know, all of that stuff. So magnesium is obviously very important. But again, it's like, you know, if you try something and you don't do well with it, well, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that like you just keep pushing it because like we all need it. You know, it's like you might need the magnesium, but first of all, the amount might be too much for you. The frequency might be too much for you. You know, the kinds, of course, could be the wrong kinds. Like maybe you do better with the taurine version or the glycine version or, you know, malate, whatever. Or you need something before it. So in general, you know, and this kind of goes into like Dr. Gilbert Ling's research, but in general, as the cell gets into a kind of a lower ATP, lower energetic state, the potassium and magnesium leave the cell and sodium and calcium kind of come in, and that has to do with like their hydrated radius size and stuff like that. So in general, I find that people do a little bit better if they focus on sodium first. And you see this, like people are downing LMNT right now. And it's like, why? Well, it's because they are using the sodium to basically prop up the quote bioenergetic of their cells and also blood volume and some other things too. But like, so, you know, I see that, but people craving that much sodium, needing that much sodium, I would not argue that is like a healthy state, to be honest. Yes, like some athletes and stuff for sure need that much sodium because of what they're doing. You know, they're losing it in sweat and stuff. But for a lot of people that are not sweating that much, I would argue it's more because they're propping up their bioenergetics versus they truly need that much sodium. I mean, you look at the RDA for sodium compared to potassium, and it's like, you know, no one's getting the potassium RDA, and people are blowing the sodium RDA through the water. So anyway, so sodium seems to go first, then usually calcium, depending upon the person, and then usually magnesium, and then last seems to be potassium.
That's like your order of operations where you like to try and fix it in?
Yeah, because of the way that the cells, as they become less energetic, less structured, again, because of the way that the sodium comes in and the calcium comes in and the potassium and magnesium come out. And the reason that I wouldn't, you know, like, it kind of scares me with how much people supplement potassium sometimes, because like if the cells are not structured such that they can get the potassium into the cell and the magnesium to an extent too, you're talking about like changing the electromagnetic, you know, signature, what's going on around the heart and stuff. And okay, I'm a physicist, so I feel like I'm a little bit more qualified to talk about some of these things. But like, and I'm not saying other people can't talk about these things, but like, I actually understand electricity and magnetism as much as physics understands them, right? Because it doesn't understand a lot. Anyways, you're like changing the electromagnetic signature around the heart, and you can have some major issues with arrhythmias, etc. So, you know, I am very cautious with some of the electrolyte supplements, et cetera, that are on the market that are really high in potassium, because that is really concerning to me. So I would rather someone take an LMNT type product or a high sodium product over a high potassium product, like from a safety consideration standpoint. But yes, in general, that is typically what I find is kind of sodium, calcium, magnesium, potassium.
One of my favorite quotes, which I probably recite too often on this podcast, is you can only understand, absorb, and process information up to your current level of understanding.
Right.
And what I like about that is I think it's applicable to everything in terms of like the most apt example is like you hear a song and you don't like it. Then 2 weeks later, you're like, yo, this thing slaps. Yeah. And like sometimes you just don't need magnesium right now. It's not the puzzle piece. It's not the next puzzle piece. It might be down the line.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't mean like this doesn't work for you. It just that means it's not the right dose. It's not the right time. It's not the right type, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's so many supplements on the market and medications too on the market right now. Again, kind of going back to Ray and Dr. Gilbert Lang's work, et cetera. I'm very focused on getting the macros, their metabolites through, glycolysis, beta oxidation, and then through the citric acid cycle, and then through the electron transport chain. Like that is where, when I read Dr. Gilbert Lang's In Search of the Physical Basis of Life, like that literally took the collective weight of, my issues and like kind of the health issues off my shoulders, because I was like, okay, I need to focus on this. Yes, could this one obscure mushroom potentially help me? Possibly. However, I want to look at my system globally as a whole. I want to get my equilibrium state, first of all, into a stable equilibrium. So if I do something to jack myself up, the ball is going to kind of come back to the center right here versus being an unstable, like on a hill, where if I like shift it a little bit too much, it's going to go down the hill, right? So I don't want an unstable state. I want a stable state. And then second of all, I want to slowly bring the stable state up higher and higher and higher. So my energetic level is getting higher and higher and higher. That's kind of how I looked at it, kind of like an increasing sine wave to, is what I say. Because there's always going to be regressions, right? And so I looked at, what gives me ATP, basically, because that's whether you take the conventional approach of how ATP is working, or you kind of take more the Gilbert Lang approach of how ATP is working. It is like fundamental to life, fundamental to our energetics. So what will get me sufficient ATP, basically. And it was focusing on those things. And so what does that bring us back to? It brings us back to, the B vitamins. Yes, it brings us back to magnesium, because we need magnesium for PDH, pyruvate dehydrogenase. It brings us back to iron sulfur clusters. It brings us back to CoQ10, vitamin K2, obviously enough food, like enough macros coming through, because like we need enough substrate to actually like create ATP. So those are kind of like some copper, zinc, of course. So again, kind of the, if you go to Chronometer and you basically look at Chronometer, fat solubles, I kind of put to the side, but except for maybe vitamin K2. But in general, we're talking about, the B vitamins, choline, and the minerals. And that's, to me, get those things right first. And then it's like, okay, if you want to use some of these other supplements to, for like a very specific reason, like for you have like a lifting goal, or you have a very cognitive demanding task that you need to deal with, and you want like some alpha GPC or something, whatever it is, then you use them then, versus let me play this like supplement whack-a-mole game of like, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this. And sometimes that works, because sometimes you do find something that like meshes with you really well and your physiology and stuff really well, and it's enough to pull you out of that kind of like learned helplessness state, so then you can address these other things, and that's great. But I usually find that people are like constantly searching, looking for this thing. They never find it. They end up with this like huge supplement graveyard. They're not, again, focused on this kind of like very basic, this is what our cells are doing, this is what's keeping us, cellular respiration is what's keeping us alive and functioning and stuff. So, I would rather find those few things of those few micronutrients that like really, mine is pantethine. Like, Ray talked about how, I think it was the first time he took thyroid, and it was like his life changed, it's like everything just like opened up, and it was just magical. And I there's an actual quote, I forget what it is right now, but we'll have to put in the show notes or something. But when I took pantothyme for the first time, it was truly life-changing for me. And for whatever reason, I need a lot of coenzyme A. I think a lot of people do. This goes back to the like NAD to NADH ratio that a lot of people are talking about right now, but there's also the CoA to acetyl-CoA ratio that's very similar. And, because I had ketotic hypoglycemia, and so I was wasting ketones. Telling me to go on a carnivore diet or a keto diet, like that would kill me, because I cannot use those ketones very well. And so I'd be wasting the ketones because I didn't have enough coenzyme A to attach, and so I'd be wasting them to get more coenzyme A to then try to make more energy and stuff.
So you couldn't get them like through the end of the metabolic cycle, through the citric acid chain or TCH cycle and all of that?
Exactly. So okay. No one can really tell me what kind of fatty acid oxidation disorder I have, but I have some issue with fatty acid oxidation. And the reason why no one can tell me is because like my carnitine labs and stuff, they don't ever, like I've done like the full carnitine profile and stuff, and like it doesn't ever come back like very positive for one of them. I probably have something wrong with coenzyme A, but if you look at my genetics, like I think it's PANK1, I'm pretty sure is like the main enzyme for people that have like CoA issues, and I don't show any issues with PANK1. So looking at my genetics would not have solved my problem for me, basically is what I'm saying, which I think a lot of people think if we look at the genetics, that's going to solve the problem, and that's not true at all. So there, kind of reeling it back though, there are supplements out there, there are medications out there that like can be that like one thing that really helps you and like really puts you over. So then you can start addressing those things. It's just hard for many people to find that supplement, I would say.
The needle in a haystack right now.
Exactly. Yeah. And so again, I go back to, okay, well, let's look at fundamental metabolism. What do we need for that? Let's see if one of these things is like that one thing for you. Again, you might have to try different forms, because like pantothenic acid, which is the usual version of B5 everyone uses, does nothing for me. I've built up to like 3 grams of pantothenic, which is a huge dose, and I don't get anything from it. But I take one, like 450 milligram amount of pantothyme, and it's truly amazing. And to this day, it's truly amazing. I think that's because I don't take it every single day, though. I'm definitely a supplement minimalist in that regard, that I don't think you should be taking something every day. I think you should take it for the effect, wait for that effect to kind of wear off like 50% or so, which I know sounds very subjective, because it's like, how do you know when it's been 50%? But like, when you go through this process and you really get to know this supplement does this for me, or this food does this for me, or this, journaling practice, or like this conversation with this person, like, literally whatever it is does this for me, then you can start to gauge like, okay, I need it on this frequency. And like, even when the things change in life, like when I became pregnant with my second son, I needed pantothyme more frequently. With breastfeeding, I still need it more frequently, versus when I was in between, with my first son and my second son, I needed it less frequently. So, you kind of get, you get to know your symptoms really well, and they might seem really obscure. Like my major B1 symptom that tells me I need more B1 is I have a hard time swallowing. It's so weird, but like I have a hard time swallowing, and that's my like big B1 symptom. Or I'll also wake up like basically desatting, which makes
what?
sense. Desatting, like your oxygen in your blood is too low.
Desaturated. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's like my like B1 symptom. I have very specific B5 symptoms. Same for every B vitamin, because I like took the time to figure out, what my symptoms were related to with which B vitamin, and same thing with the minerals too. But I also understand that takes time, and a lot of people, the mind, that's like a very mind-body approach, and a lot of people, especially when you're sick, they have too much mind-body, where they get any kind of symptom, or I don't even say symptom, they get any kind of change, and they take it as like, this is a negative, people will eat something and their hands will get like warm and red and stuff, like kind of a good thing. But a lot of people will jump to, oh, that must be histamine, or I must be having a reaction to this. And it's like, But you might not be, though. Like this might be the normal state of what your body's actually looking for, but you've just gotten so used to this other state, and so you take it as pathological. But it might not be pathological. So kind of taking more of this like curious approach versus something's wrong, and I get it. Like, I understand when you're in that state, you're like so anxious about, I mean, I've been there, I completely understand, but I would just, say like, be more curious about things versus immediately jumping to like the negative. And, there's biologically, there's a lot of reasons we do that with the whole reticular activating system and all of that stuff. That's why, when you are working with someone, I think it's very important to have them clearly, explicitly define their goals and what they're like trying to get out of their health, because, you'll be working with someone and they just don't have a symptom anymore. And then you'll be like, oh yeah, you remember when you used to have this? And they'll say, what are you talking about? I never did that. And then you're like, yeah, it's on your intake form. Like, you used to deal with this symptom or whatever. And they don't even think about that anymore, because they're like past that. They're, they've dealt with that and they're on to the next thing. They're like, what else must be wrong with me? And so that's a little bit challenging, because sometimes you get to the point where it's like, stop searching, like go live, like there's not there, like, yes, you could potentially clean up a little bit more, but like at what cost, like how much time, how much money, versus just like go do, obviously it takes a lot of time to get to that point, but yeah.
Yeah. There's I think it's a Thomas Sowell analogy. I heard it from Mike Isertel, but he was talking about how if you want to clean the river, it's like everyone's like, all right, yeah, let's clean it. It's like, how clean do you want it? So, oh, pristine, like 100% clean, all the toxins out. So, well, you can get to 90% for, I don't know, $10,000. To get to 95%, it's $100,000. To get to 99%, it's $1 million. To get to 99.9, it's $100 million. To get to 100%, it's, $10 billion. So at some point, it's just a huge diminishing return, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Pareto principle, and it's basically what are the 20% cause. It's more, the Pareto principle is more about economics, but I just like to apply it to life. But it's basically like, what's the 20% of things that you can do that gives you the 80% effect? And that's what I focus on, especially because I'm a mom of 2 sons, and I have a husband in the Air Force who's gone. Like, I just don't have time, to be 100% and to just get that like, remaining 20% out of it. So it's like, what are the 20% of things I can do that gives me the 80% of effect? And on days that I have more time, I devote more time to those, things. And on days I have less time, I call it floors and ceilings. So, the floors are like the minimum that I do every day for like my health and like upkeep and stuff. And then the ceiling would be like, if I had all the time in the world, that these are the things that I would do. But to be honest, like if I had all the time in the world, I would not be focused on health. I'd be focused on like, I like to fly little airplanes, so I would like go fly a little airplane. Yeah. So yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone, and also I would like you, if you don't mind, could you explain a little bit about how you actually see learned helplessness in an individual? And because I think a lot of people, I don't think most people that have or are in a state of learned helplessness see themselves as being helpless.
Yeah. So I would think, okay. I think the first thing is that so many of us are very externalized. And I would really, I don't know much about the Gen Zers, so I really can't speak to them. But I'm specifically talking a lot about the Gen Xers, even the kind of younger boomers to an extent. Actually, we'll include the boomers to millennials. We kind of grew up in a time where, and again, this is all averages, right? Because I can't speak to the individual. There's so much nuance when it comes to the individual, but we're just going to go with averages for all of this conversation. We kind of grew up in a time where, for the most part, if anything happened to you, you went to the doctor. You didn't, you had a cold, you went to the doctor. They gave you an antibiotic, even if it was, quote, viral in nature. They still gave you an antibiotic. And thankfully, allopathic medicine is starting to realize that you shouldn't do that. And it's like driving antibiotic resistance, and an antibiotic will do literally nothing for your viral infection. So, and there's, even the research about like, do you get better in spite of the antibiotic? Do you get better because of the antibiotic? Is it like a synergistic thing? Does it actually improve or like decrease the amount of time you're sick for an actual bacterial infection? Like that's kind of still up in the air too. But yeah, so something happened and a lot of people were sent to the doctor. and they were told, okay, we'll take this, and they weren't told, go home, rest, trust yourself, you're strong enough, support yourself, eat enough fluids, all that stuff. Thankfully, I'm grateful for my parents because we didn't rush to the doctor every time something happened. I mean, I took antibiotics once as a child, and it was because I had strep throat. So I think that was the first thing, is that we have very much offloaded our health to other people. And so again, we get a symptom, and instead of being curious about it, we go ask someone else about it. You see this in the Instagram health world too, where it's like, well, I have this symptom, what do I do? And yes, at a point you do need some information, but eventually you need to then take that information and see how it affects you. So learned helplessness, how you would see this kind of happen. Say you work with someone and they tell you, okay, well, try this food, or, try changing your diet this way, or try this supplement or whatever. And you take it and it makes you feel worse. Well, you don't want to continue taking it, but people will continue to take it because they were told to take it, because they were told, well, this helped this person, or this is what I do for people in your situation or with your symptomology, etc. And I see that as a form of learned helplessness, because you're not taking accountability for yourself, basically. You're offloading everything to other people. So to me, that is the biggest way that I view learned helplessness. I don't necessarily view it as you don't do anything. Now, there is definitely the kind of, there's so much information out there. It's where do I start? Program hopping.
Paralysis.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I would say, a part of learned helplessness too. But and program hopping and stuff like that, I think is learned helplessness, or diet hopping. Okay, I'm going to go vegan. Okay, now I'm going to go carnivore. Okay, I'm going to go keto. Oh, I gained a bunch of weight on my, vacation. So now I'm going to start intermittent fasting or alternate day fasting or whatever to take the weight off.
Why do you think that's learned helplessness though? Because to me, that's them saying this isn't working for me. I'm going to go take this step.
Yeah. I guess I could see that. I still see it as offloading to other people though. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see that as taking a step. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think it would be, though, more so taking a step if you are consciously choosing it, which consciousness is interesting. I've been reading William James's psychology book, and it's so interesting what he thought and what they used to think about consciousness, because people say, well, I do something unconsciously, and he basically makes the argument of you're not doing it unconsciously. It's just you have separations of consciousness, and you're not aware that one of your consciousnesses that you've held your phone while walking at the same time. You have a different conscious, running each one of those things, and you're just not aware of it though. So yeah. That's
interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say that, so learned helplessness I don't see as doing nothing, which I think a lot of people think is what learned helplessness is. I think it's you're not actually listening to what your body and mind, etc., are telling you.
It's almost like a disconnect between the inputs and the outputs. Is that what you're saying? That's really interesting, because I think that's really powerful, because if you aren't, if X doesn't equal Y, A plus B doesn't equal C, you're just kind of sitting in nowhere land.
Exactly. And I don't care if this worked for your mom or someone else. You're a different person. It didn't work for you. Maybe you need something. Maybe you said with the song, maybe it will help you down the road. But for right now, it's not helping you. You need something else. So, and that's okay. And stop, back to this mind body thing. I think when people are really sick, I use sick very loosely, because it's not you have a cold. It's when you're sick, it's I couldn't walk. I had autophony. I had all these issues, right? And when you're sick, everything becomes mind body, because I said, something changes and you're oh my goodness, what happened? What's going on in my body and stuff. Where people who aren't sick, or they're not acutely sick, they kind of more have the metabolic diseases and stuff like that, or just the general aging type syndromes, diseases, they seem to not have a lot of mind body at all, where their body is giving them signals of hey, if you do not do something right now, something bad's going to happen. I mean, my body before I got really sick, like it kept giving me signals, and I kept just like being like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to overpower this and stuff. So there's like not a lot of mind body there until there is too much mind body. And it's about like kind of coming back to the center of, again, like being curious, listening to yourself, taking input externally, but not only using this as the prime or the only source. Like you have to match it up to your response to things and then move forward that way. So it's kind of like a both and versus like a either or situation.
Mm-hmm. And when you say mind body, I'm assuming you're referring to like mind body connection.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when you're saying someone's like really mind body, you're kind of saying like everything they do affects how they feel.
Yeah. Or they're constantly watching themselves. Like people that have like chronic illness, they'll understand what I'm saying. You're like chronically, you're watching everything. You're if you feel a difference in your body, if you feel like a difference in your digestive tract, or you feel like I don't know, an itchiness on your wrist, or like it could literally be anything. You start to be like, what was that? Like, what's going on? Like, you start to kind of catastrophize and ruminate. And it can be really hard to get out of that. And so I can very much empathize, because like you are, everything kind of becomes around this, like, am I getting worse and worse and worse? And how do I like come out of this? And it can be hard to come out of that. But choosing to not ruminate, choosing to not catastrophize. I find doing things that like recenter you, like actually in your body. So like instead of focusing what's going on internally, you kind of focus on, okay, like right now I'm sitting on my foot. Right now my other foot is like flat on the ground. So you kind of focus on like, where's my body in space? What's it touching? Breath work can sometimes help, but I also find that breath work makes people ruminate to like even more, because you can't like get those ideas out of your mind. Same thing with meditation, basically. I really like things like yoga nidra and stuff, or NSDR, because you're kind of relaxing your body and your mind, but you're listening to other people, which I know goes against what I just said. But sometimes when you're in that state, you do need to kind of, I don't want to say dissociate yourself in a way, but you need to like pull yourself out of the internal to a little bit more of the external. Like, where are you in space? Where are you, mentally versus inside of you? What's going on?
I think that can definitely. I use exercise a lot for that. I think a lot of people do. Obviously, that can go too far where you're just running 100 miles a day because you don't want to spend any time inside.
Yeah.
But I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think exercise is great. I'm more talking to the person that can't exercise right now, because But I think that even if you think that you can't exercise, like maybe you can't go to the gym right now. But like I said, I started with moving fingers. Like you have to do something. And the idea with like CFSME is kind of like throttling. They use a different term, but it's basically like throttling, where like it's like slow, gradual exposure to like more and more movement until the point where you can like actually start to walk again, lift again, etc., without having major PEM.
Which is chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah, and
ME.
ME is it's like it's something encephalitis. It's a long term.
Okay.
But chronic fatigue syndrome / ME, yeah, they're like the same thing. It's just the people don't like to be termed chronic fatigue syndrome anymore. They prefer the ME diagnosis because I think a lot of people have kind of just looked down at chronic fatigue, just like fibromyalgia, etc., as like being kind of like made up things. We don't necessarily know what's wrong with you, so we're just going to diagnose you with these things, where ME kind of sounds a little bit more like a proper diagnosis, I guess. But there's still so many theories out there as to like what is actually driving these states.
So where do you think we should start? We're just trying to reclaim our health. Maybe we're not very, very sick, but like we're just like, all right, I have brain fog, whatever it is, to poor digestion. Where do you think is the correct starting place, or a good starting place to start from?
Yeah. So, we've been doing this Minnesota starvation experiment. And for the average person, I would say a great majority of people are dealing with malnutrition. And this becomes a struggle to sell, though, right? Because first of all, you have people being like, you need to eat less. And, so this becomes like a hard sell for people who believe that they need to lose fat, basically. And it's also a hard sell because most doctors will argue malnutrition is impossible in the first world. We fortify our food. Like, there's no way you're malnourished. But if you look at, the starvation experiments, and again, we kind of talk about this in the podcast, but they weren't fasting. These men were eating 1,600 calories a day, and they were, they weren't walking, they weren't moving like an absurd amount compared to like what the standard kind of, recommendations are for the average person when it comes to movement and lifting nowadays. But you see pretty much the entire list of what most people come to you about. And so, the first thing that I would recommend from the biochem side is, first of all, start paying attention to what are you eating and how do you respond to it. And so keep a food journal. This can be a little bit difficult, like if you have this mind-body problem, because then you can start to catastrophize all this stuff. But again, we're talking about the like average person here, right? So, start keeping a food journal, start paying attention to, okay, when I eat these foods, I feel this way. And then start to prioritize the foods that make you feel better. And then over time, start to increase more and more, very slowly, start to increase more and more of those foods until that you find that upper end of your maintenance range. Because I don't think people realize how high our maintenance range. So maintenance here means your weight is not increasing. I think that's what people keep missing with the like Strong Sisters podcast that we've been doing, is we keep getting questions about, well, I did the Pro-Metabolic, like I ate all these foods, I did the all-in and stuff. And it's like that's fine. But if you're gaining weight, you're not at maintenance. Like, yes, there's going to be water weight fluctuations all over the place and stuff. That's fine. But the average weight every week, your average should pretty much be the same. If it's not, if it's decreasing, well, you're under eating. If it's increasing, you're overeating. And so you adjust from there. And, this can look really slow. I went from, I originally went from 1,700, but then eventually I went from 1,900 to 2,800 calories a day. But it was over 7+ months, so it's some people have to increase like 5 calories a week, which in the realm of tracking is like insignificant. That's within the realm of error, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, first of all, start paying attention to what foods you objectively do well with. So I think that's the important thing, is objectively, some foods you might enjoy eating, but that doesn't mean it makes you feel better.
What would those expectations be for what objectively makes you feel better?
Yeah, so I think it's, what you typically hear. I'm not as much of a fan of pulse. I prefer blood pressure over pulse, to be honest. I say that because there's so many confounding things that I find can skew your pulse. And so I would rather people look at their blood pressure. But so I typically talk to a lot of people with low blood pressure. Yes, I also talk to a lot of people with high blood pressure, but more I would say, especially a lot of the women I talk to, their blood pressure is typically low. And so, that would be an indicator of like, okay, are we getting the blood pressure back into like a normal range? Your temperature, your bowel movements, are you at least having one like really solid bowel movement a day? And you don't need something like coffee or cascara, etc., to like cause the bowel movement. Brain fog, or sleep, all those kind of like general things that I think most people look to, libido. Energy
levels after meals too. I think it's
exactly.
a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. And desire to like live life, the energy to play with your children or to play with your partner or, whatever. I think play is like really important. Like, I don't think that we should be exactly like children, but I do agree with Ray that we should kind of, we should be aiming more as best as possible for what it was like when we were like teenagers or like early adulthood, which again, I say this very loosely because there's a lot of teenagers and young adults who, had issues, right? Like I started having issues in my, I'm 32 now, and I started having issues like when I was young. So like, there's a lot there, but again, we're talking about averages here. So yeah, so that would be kind of the food front. The supplement front, again, I would kind of look at, I always tag the Hormones Matter website. They have this great, schematic diagram of the citric acid cycle. And like for each step, they kind of have like, these are kind of the main micronutrients for each step. And so, I would maybe once a week, once every other week, put what you're eating as best as possible into something like Chronometer, and only look at the foods that are not fortified. I don't use them for the micronutrients. So only look at the foods that are not fortified. We can talk about fortification. I'm not a huge fan. We'll just say that. Just because, there's a lot there, but, look through and say like, am I getting enough B5? Am I getting enough B1? Am I getting enough choline? If not, it's like, I would prioritize those foods if possible. Or some people just need a little bit more. Like I said, I need a lot of pantethine. Some people, need more B2, or B12, like literally whatever it is. So that's the supplements I would focus on first, is like filling in those holes with the supplements. And again, finding the supplement that works for you. Like, so many people will just jump to, well, I have MTHFR, MTRR, whatever, so I need methylcobalamin and L5 methyl tetrahydrofolate, the methylated version of B9, and then they take it and they feel horrible. So, it's like, if you don't do well with them, try folinic acid for B9 and try, adenosylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, or adenosylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. Go ahead.
So 2 questions, just going back to the maintenance range. What drives and so I think you clarified it pretty well, but basically the idea is that you have, let's say, a range of 1,000 calories, all of which you can be at and not gain weight. So it could be, for me, 3,000 calories and 2,000 calories. And it's not like if I go from 2,000 calories to 3,000 calories overnight, I'm going to gain weight. Exactly. But basically the idea, I think, is you can upregulate all of the metabolic processes so that you're just burning more calories and using more energy more efficiently, correct? Yeah,
exactly. It becomes like, assuming you have sufficient enzymes, sufficient micronutrients to get those metabolites through and stuff, you could get to the point where you're like sending a lot of stuff throughout the day and into the night, producing a ton of ATP, producing a lot of CO2, water, which I think is very important as well for other reasons. And it's like well understood with like refeeding, especially in like the eating disorder refeeding, and then, the kind of Minnesota starvation experiments, which, we don't have a lot of new research about this other than just kind of like case studies from refeeding with like eating disorders, because, well, you would never be able to do like an MSc nowadays. It would never be allowed. But you see people go hypermetabolic. So, a lot of women recovering from eating disorders have to eat 4,000 plus calories a day because they go hypermetabolic, that they don't start putting on any fat until they go well above that. And you do see this with people, but I don't recommend just jumping there. Okay, I have to qualify all of this with, if you have an eating disorder, I think the book Sick Enough is really worth reading. And I really would, recommend you go work with someone who is respectful of you, where you are in your life, what's going on, and can get you there. Because, I'm not talking to you because I don't know you. I'm also just, I feel like it'd be unethical for me to talk to you because of everything that you're dealing with. So there's that. But yes, so people become hypermetabolic, but the problem is that I wouldn't necessarily just recommend jumping there, because again, you need to make sure that you have sufficient micronutrients, et cetera, to start getting things through. And also, like, a lot of people have like a lot of inflammatory conditions and stuff going on because they have a lot of like fat in storage and stuff, which is then causing a lot of inflammation, which is then affecting the mitochondria. And then like you go into the issues of like, the ratios of like NAD to NADH and acetyl-CoA to CoA and pyruvate to lactate and, the ketones to each other. Like, so you see all these ratios and you need to kind of slowly get these ratios. Well, in my opinion, I think you need to slowly get these ratios to correct themselves. So a higher a higher NAD to NADH, a higher CoA to acetyl-CoA, to then get that your kind of like metabolic machinery like running again, so that, if you're in this metabolic type 2 diabetic state, for example, where you have ketones, fatty acids, glucose, BCAAs, like everything high in your blood, because it's just not getting into the cells because the cells are not able to fully take everything through. And so they're just like stopping everything back up because it's like, I can't get this through here. What are you trying to do? And then it's like, just send it to the fat. And then the fat, our fat deposits are like, what the heck? We can't keep storing all of this stuff. And then we have, you have some of the metabolites that are negatives, like propenyl-CoA. Too much of that can be, a negative. Methylmalonic acid, too much of that. These come in when you have the branched chain amino acids coming into the citric acid cycle, which I have to say really fast. A lot of people in the bioenergetic space seem to think that it's impossible for branched chain amino acids and like protein to come into the citric acid cycle. They seem to only think glucose or fatty acids can come in, but that's not true. Like the BCAAs can come in, and then so they go through propenyl-CoA. There's like a bunch of steps, but eventually propenyl-CoA, which needs biotin. And then you go to methylmalonic acid, which needs adenosylcobalamin, so adenylyl B12. And then that goes to succinyl-CoA, and then succinyl-CoA can go to complex 2, the electron transport chain, and make succinate, and then succinate goes to fumarate, and then it just goes back around again. Yeah, like, yeah. But you want to get these things starting to go through, actually starting to produce energy, and then over time, you can start to slowly eat more and more and more. Again, I would focus more on, less processed foods as best as possible. We can talk about like macros and stuff in a little bit, but yeah, so you kind of want to get these metabolites like cleared out, so then you can start taking your own fatty acids, like running them through. I know a lot of people, again, in the bioenergetic space talk about like glucuronidation for the fatty acids. The issue with I think that's fine. The issue with glucuronidation is, first of all, you need glucose for glucuronidation. If you're not getting the glucose into the cell and the liver's having a problem and all that stuff, well, you're not making glucarate, and so you're gonna have an issue with that. So many people are on at least one pharmaceutical. Pharmaceuticals go through glucuronidation. The fat soluble vitamins go through glucuronidation. Estrogen goes through glucuronidation. Like all of these things go through, so it's pretty taxed. I am more under the viewpoint of let's get things through our metabolic processes, and then let's breathe out the CO2 and water, basically, that we produce from doing that, in the least damaging way possible. That's kind of how I view things. So like a lot of people look down upon things like carnitine, for example. And I think carnitine can be, Alcar really helped me, especially early on. And I still take Alcar sometimes. Sometimes because I build up so much CoA that I need a little bit more acetyl groups. And so that's where the acetyl part of it comes in. But, when you are in a rested state, I think Alcar or carnitine in general can be helpful to kind of shuttle some of those fatty acids in when you're in a rested state, when we should be doing a little bit more fatty acid oxidation, to kind of get those things through, in conjunction with B2, B5, again, all the B vitamins, etc. But especially B2 and B5, because it's a fatty acid. And you see this there are a lot of people that have like mild forms of glycogen storage issues. They have mild forms of like, some of these fatty acid oxidation disorders that require carnitine for life, because the body's just not making sufficient carnitine. And you can ask the reason why, like maybe they need more methylation support, et cetera, which is important for carnitine synthesis. So I'm not against like the use of carnitine supplementation. But again, it's like what... I wouldn't use a carnitine supplementation before I'm about to go sprint. Like that to me would not make sense. But would I use it like, potentially before going to sleep, or like on a Sunday where I'm not doing much? Like, yeah, I wouldn't take it first thing if I've never tried it before going to sleep, just in case, because you never know how a supplement is going to respond with your specific physiology. So yeah, okay. So to sum all of this up, pay attention to what you're eating. Pay attention to what foods objectively make you feel better, what foods objectively seem to alleviate some of your symptoms. Eat more of them very, very slowly over time. Build that maintenance range. Again, we're not putting on scale weight. You might see progress pictures, clothes fitting differently, etc., because of recomp that's happening. So you're losing fat and putting on muscle at the same time. But again, the scale weight's pretty much staying the same. Bring those maintenance calories up, as high as possible, and then like keep them there for a long time. Maintenance is hard. I really appreciate her account is Wandy Wellness on Instagram. She mostly talks to older women, but I think what she says is just as applicable, if not more, to younger women of like, maintenance is hard and you need to be in maintenance for a long time especially to put on muscle mass. Because like, let's be honest, what kills so many people? It's like, you're 80 and you're walking and you fall and you break your hip or you break your shoulder, and then you need a shoulder replacement or major hip surgery or major knee surgery. And then once you go to surgery, like everything just starts to go downhill. And it's like, let's avoid some of these things, So, and then of course you also have the metabolic reasons that most people die in this country too. So it's kind of addressing those things. So yeah, so that would be kind of more the biochem side. Again, supplementation I think can be great, but I would first focus on filling in your gaps. And, if you're not getting enough B6, for example, I wouldn't go out and take pyridoxine HCl. I would get P5P. I would take a very, very, very small amount because a lot of people have major issues supplementing B6. This is just an example. Usually, if your ALP, your alkaline phosphatase, is too low, that can be like an indicator that you might have an issue supplementing B6. And you need to, you'll typically see like ALT and AST low too. But like, and so like your doctor's not going to, there's no low ALT, AST. If your doctor sees like low, like 12, 14 ALT, AST, they're going to be like, your liver is great. And you're like, there's no way my liver is great. Like the way I feel right now, what's going on in my body, like my liver's probably struggling. And this probably is not indicative of what's actually going on. And it's probably because you have insufficient zinc, B2 and or B6. So yeah, so there's nuance here. There's nuance in what form, there's tons of different B1 forms. Not everyone, a lot of people talk about TTFD or Benfo. I do best with thiamine mononitrate, and people would tell me that's impossible, but I do best with thiamine mononitrate. So it's again like finding what is the best form for you. So, that takes time, and I recognize that takes time, and that can be hard. And I also recognize that, but I think people are looking for a quick fix when, for the most part, most people didn't get here overnight, and you just kind of have to accept that you're not going to get better overnight. The CFS-ME research, at least for that, shows that most people it takes them 7 to 10 years. And that's for sure what it took me to, and why is that? I mean, probably cell turnover lifetimes, I would imagine, maybe something else. But, I agree that for the most part, that's what we see. Some people, they take something like a fluoroquinolone and they're floxed overnight. And, I'm really sorry for those people because that is a case of like, you were just like thrown off a cliff without any kind of informed consent, etc. Or, other things too. I don't want to say just in case it gets like thrown off of YouTube. So we'll just talk about the fluoroquinolone class, but like informed consent with anything. And this also applies to supplementation too. And I think it's a big missing piece in the kind of like alt health world is informed consent with supplementation. Like, ashwagandha, rhodiola, like some of these things, SAMe to an extent, 5-HTP, like some of these things can really mess a lot of people up, especially if people go out and they take like a full dose of something. I never recommend that. When someone is starting a new supplement, I always recommend you start one supplement at a time and you start with like a fifth of a capsule, like, and usually in the morning and depending, and then, usually like on a day that you don't necessarily have to be on, like, I wouldn't like take a new supplement like right before you're about to give a presentation or something like that. And then like wait kind of 3 days of like trialing the supplement before trying something else, where so many people are they see a functional medicine doctor or whatever, and they're given this like litany of, this like list of like, take this, and this, and the supplements have like multiple things in them. And it's like, you might feel bad with one thing, but then really good with another thing. And so it's like covering up for that thing that's making you feel bad. But it's like, eventually it's a net negative. Like, yeah, and again, I understand that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort on your part. But I don't really know, there's no way around that, like you have to this goes back to the learned helplessness thing. Like you need to take ownership of yourself and your life and what your body, mind, etc. are telling you. So yeah, biochem piece. Biophysics piece, the next thing that I would focus on, sunlight. even if it's just 3 times a day, you step outside your door, you look in the direction of the sun, not directly at the sun, but just in the direction of the sun, and you step right back in. Yeah. And you step right back in again. And so the 3 times a day, I usually recommend, before the UVA rise in the morning. So before UV comes out, so you just have visible and infrared. Sometime
which
around
is like
solar
around sunrise.
No, usually, so like here in Northern California, it changes like in the summertime, but usually before like 9, sometimes 8 in the morning. If you get the D-Minder app, it will tell you for your location. When you see the UVI, so the UV index go to 1, that's when you know the UVA rise has happened. And so UVA, because there's UVB as well. So before that, step outside, look in the direction, step back inside, and go back, whatever you need to do inside. Around solar noon, so around midday when the sun is like pretty much like right overhead, again, step outside, look in the direction, step back inside. And then as after the UV has dropped off, so around like as the sun is setting, for example, that would be another good time to just, again, step outside, and more, for the most part, is great if you have the time. A lot of people I work with, they are parents or working professionals, like that. So it's again like meeting people where they are. So you do the best you can with what you can do. So, and more is not always better, right? Because it's like a U-shaped curve. So like you don't want to get like sunburned. That wouldn't be good. So just to your max. And I would rather people focus on that. I think red light panels and stuff can be helpful. Again, that's also a U-shaped curve though. Like too much red light, I think, is not the way I would go, but not at the expense of seeing the sun. Like I would rather you go out, see the sun versus using a red light panel, personally. So there's that. A red light can be great because it can be a little bit more localized. So like if you had scar tissue or something like that's when I would use something like that. But again, not at the expense of seeing the sunlight. Being grounding, I think, is great. The issue with grounding is that so much of our electrical systems are in the ground now. And so you don't necessarily know, like, are you right over, a main line, into the house or into the office building or whatever. So that could be a potential issue. If you get on the ground and you start to feel better, that's usually like a pretty good subjective way of being like, okay, this is probably like a fine spot for me. The other thing too is that a lot of people think grounding is about picking up electrons. I disagree with that. We talk about being in the reductive state and that causing kind of oxidative stress. And so it would make no sense that you would want to pick up more electrons. I think that you are offloading, not necessarily electrons, but I guess we'll just use electrons because people like to look at little point particles. You're more offloading that to like lower the noise, etc. So I think, that can be helpful. Really, is you have to be careful with this if you have any form of like dysautonomia, but like really hot baths can be incredibly helpful too because of the infrared. So like, especially in the wintertime, anything. Then the reason for water is that it's more conductive than air. So that's the reason.
What infrared? Because the heat the water's generating? Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. So infrared is heat, right? That's what infrared
I just never would have thought about that in terms of like like literal water generating infrared light because of the heat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's when I was, bedbound and in a wheelchair and stuff, like hot baths or like just heat in general, like saved my life. And, from like a Gilbert Ling, Gerald Pollack standpoint, like infrared structures the cells. So it makes sense why it helps me so much. And UV gives more energy to the cells. So,
which is why you want both.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but especially during the wintertime when, we only lose UV here for like a month and like a week and a half or so. So we're I'm grateful for that. But some people lose UV for quite a long time, especially like in Canada and stuff. And so using things like really hot baths, again, like don't burn yourself, like use some thought here. And if you are prone to things like dysautonomia, be very careful getting in, getting out, maybe have some electrolytes there with you and stuff just in case. Make sure that you're not doing it alone, make sure someone's there to check on you. But yeah, the really hot baths can be helpful. I wouldn't necessarily recommend like, heat blankets or stuff like that, just because of the non-native EMF that they're producing.
Some soup though.
What's
broth, soup.
Yeah, soup. Yeah, warm liquids. In general, like I usually recommend like at least room temperature, if not warmer liquids, like when you're drinking. If it's the summertime and you're like, I really want a cold liquid. I mean, I get it, but like instead of drinking a cold liquid, have a cooling the palms of your hands or the soles of your feet, because you have the AVAs that come out to the palms of your hands, the bridge of your nose, and the soles of your feet. So that's actually this applies both ways. If you are freezing and you're like, I need to warm myself up, like don't put heat on your brainstem or like back here, put heat on the palms of your hand or the soles of your feet. And then if you're too hot, cool the palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. And that tends to help.
So no iced coffee for Kathleen?
I don't do well with coffee, and I actually don't like coffee. So yeah, I'm more of a tea person. I really like chamomile tea.
Theoretically, if you did like coffee, you would still kind of steer away from iced coffee for that reason?
Yeah, I like I said, liquids, I like most people to be room temperature or warmer, if possible. So, every so often, if you want to go, I don't know, get a really nice drink with someone, I'm not a huge fan of people drinking alcohol for a myriad of reasons, but I also understand it's like meeting people where they are. And so if you're going to drink, what I would recommend is, instead of like downing 5 kind of like cheap beers or whatever, 3 cheap beers, like go get a really nice mixed drink, something that's expensive, and really enjoy it. Be present. I think that like if we can sum up a lot of things, it's like be present with yourself, Stop dissociating. And again, there's many reasons why we dissociate. And yes, it can go with a high serotonin state, etc. But, and sometimes we do need to dissociate because it's a protective mechanism and there's a reason why we're doing it, and you need to address those reasons. And sometimes people are not in a state that they can address those reasons, and so they need to address other things first. Get the really nice drink, be really, present with it, really enjoy it, and have a good time with your friends, so that's the biophysics side. The psycho-emotional side, I mean, there's so much there with that side, like counseling can help some people. Counseling can be the worst thing for some people. Journaling can help some people. Journaling can be the worst thing. Meditation can be helpful. Meditation can be the worst thing. So again, it's kind of like trialing some of these things, and again, figuring out like what works specifically for you. Some people, with relationships, some people need to leave relationships. Some people need to wake up every day and be like, no, I chose this relationship. I'm constantly choosing this relationship. Love is, it's not just this like butterfly feeling. Like, yes, there are those feelings and stuff, and yes, they come and go and everything. But like, really, I think love is more about like a choice every day of like, I'm choosing this person no matter, how difficult it is. Like, almost like the way that you love your children, for example, but there's also the romantic side of it too. But yeah, like the psycho-emotional is so individual that it's kind of hard to give like a blanket statement about that. It's much easier to give blanket statements about like biophysics and biochemistry, I think, versus that. The movement biomechanics piece, again, it's about meeting people where they are, but eventually I think most people should work up to approximately 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day. I like leveraging steps when it comes to eventually cutting, because I do have people do cuts and I'm not against them, etc. So I think steps are like a really easy lever to pull when it comes to a cut. But so, averaging about 8,000 steps per day, I think is great when you're not in a cut, like just like normal maintenance. Lifting, I think a lot of people don't get started with lifting because they think that they have to like do all of this work and they just don't have the time or, whatever it is. And I disagree with that. Like I've had people make huge improvements with just one day a week of like about 35 minutes of lifting. And, I think 2 to 3 days a week is probably best for most people. But if you can only do 1 day a week, and that's all, that's great. Like, let's do 1 day a week, and 4 to 6 movements. I like full body for the most part, because again, you're only lifting 1 to 3 times per week. I like the kind of 5 to 7 rep per set with like only a couple warm-up sets, so you're not getting a bunch of junk volume. I like taking, once you get familiar with the movements and you understand them, I like having people take them to tempo technical failure. So you really get that mechanical tension. And then just over time, you're progressively overloading, right? And if you're progressively overloading, you should be putting on muscle. At first, like a lot of it is like neuro gains and stuff. And so you may not, there's so much here. Like if you're in your newbie gains side of things, which I wish I could go back. I wish I could have newbie gains all over again, like knowing what I know now about like eating enough and stuff. But if you're newbie gains, like you're going to put on muscle. Like you keep showing up, you keep progressing in weight, like you're going to put on muscle. But for people that are like detrained or whatever at first, you will probably see the weight increase somewhat rapidly, especially as you get more comfortable with it. But you're not going to really see as much of a muscle increase, because again, putting on muscle is very slow. And I don't think people realize this, but it's a really slow process. So at first the weight will not necessarily track with your muscle mass, but eventually it'll start to track with your muscle mass as you start to get to your like natty limit, free fat mass limit. So that's lifting 1 to 3 times per week. I do think some form of like other movements, like I'm a huge fan of spinal waves. Just like or dancing, just something that like gets you moving kind of in all of the planes at one time versus kind of more just like 1 or 2 planes that you typically move in when it comes to lifting. I think that can be great. Preferably
something fun too that you actually enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I like spinal waves. Some people like dancing. Some people like martial arts. I think that's great. I think sprinting once every other week or once a week. Again, like if you've never, or it's been a long time sprinting, I don't recommend just like going out and sprinting because you might pull a hamstring or something like that. So like assuming you're like probably warmed up for it, doing approximately 7 sprints or basically doing, up to 7 sprints, but you only sprint until you start to lose time, because like it's kind of the same idea of like lifting, right? Like if you, say you do a sprint and it takes, 20 seconds or 15 seconds, we'll say, and then like you do 2 more and there's still 15 seconds, and then you do one, it's like 13 seconds. At that point, I'd be like, okay, we're done. So, cause you've like dropped off the time. And so you're no longer like pushing yourself more, if that makes sense. That would be kind of, there's so much you can get into with biomechanics and stuff too. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Deep. Yeah.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. I will say though, so I've dislocated my left shoulder like an absurd amount of times, subluxed an absurd amount of times. I had a frozen shoulder for 3 years. I still don't have like the best, shoulder. That's my shoulder flexion, and shoulder adduction is like not that great. And I used to have costochondritis. I used to have slipping rib syndrome. I used to have really, really bad forward shoulder, forward head, like all that stuff. I have tried so many things. The one thing that has helped me is something called a back pod. And so, if you have any of these things and you've tried a lot of stuff, I highly recommend the back pod. You basically just like lay on it. It's this like hard thing that you like lay on it, and it helps. Well, it was created for costochondritis to kind of like free up those back ribs right there. So then you stop putting so much pressure on the front ribs, which is what costochondritis basically is that they're like trying to move because the back ribs aren't moving very well. But it like helps all of those things. At least for me, it did. And I've had multiple people use it now, and it helps them too. So I'm sorry if hopefully it's okay for me to like make suggestions about,
No,
I don't get paid by them or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay, Kathleen, we know, we know that you own them.
Yeah. But yeah, I highly, and like, if you don't want to buy the back body, because I think it's like $65 on Amazon or something, even just using like a plyo ball and like putting it, behind your sternum and like on either side of your spine and stuff like that, that can help immensely too. So yeah, I highly recommend that. But yeah, the biomechanics piece gets so convoluted that we'll just leave that there. I think those are like the big, it's sleep. I mean, all of those things will help sleep in general, well, if we can kind of go back to the eating piece, I find that people do better if they have well-defined meals versus grazing throughout the day, primarily because of the migrating motor complex. And then this also runs into issues with like the vagal nerve and stuff. And so people have like either rapid gastric emptying or delayed gastric emptying. I more so see people that have delayed gastric emptying. And so because of this, a lot of people, they'll either do two things. They'll either eat early on and then be like, I don't want to have dinner because I feel horrible. Or they are just like, I don't feel that great when I eat. And so I'm going to wait to the end of the day and then I'm going to eat a big meal. And then that's all I'm going to eat because I just don't feel that great when I eat. So, when it comes to those things, and then this also gets into things like GERD, etc. When it comes to those things, addressing your parasympathetic nervous system. So, acetylcholine, basically. I know Ray, seemed to be a fan of anticholinergics. I don't necessarily agree with that at all. I find that people do better when they support acetylcholine, especially if they have some of these issues. Especially because like you need acetylcholine for stomach acid release. A lot of people have major stomach acid issues, and then the stomach doesn't become acidic enough, and then pepsinogen doesn't become pepsin because it needs a pH of like 2.2 or less, so very acidic, in order to become pepsin. Pepsin's required to break down, your protein, and then you're not necessarily breaking down your protein, so you're not necessarily getting to those B vitamins and minerals that you think you're eating, because so many people, first of all, we're under eating, so we're not eating enough calories. And so what do? We eat more protein because typically per calorie, protein has more micronutrients in it, right? Makes sense. Well, if your stomach's not acidic enough, or you're not, producing enough pepsin, etc., which those two things are very likely in a low energy availability state, you're not breaking down your food. A lot of that's being sent to your microbiome to have to deal with. And now your microbiome's dealing with it. And now like you wonder why, people have SIBO issues and like all these other issues and stuff. So, really addressing that. And then, kind of back to the stomach acid, and also parasympathetic nervous system. If your stomach acid isn't acidic enough, if your stomach's not acidic enough, the lower esophageal sphincter doesn't close appropriately. And so then that's where you get the GERD issue. And so, there was a functional study that was done that showed people all the way up until their like 80s. I think they looked at like 20-year-olds all the way to their 80s. And they produced sufficient stomach acid that if you were to do the test in the morning, it showed like you had enough stomach acid. But the problem was the refill, if you're stimulating it over time, you're stimulating your stomach over time to produce stomach acid throughout the day. That was the issue. So again, this goes back to the people that either, only eat once or twice a day because they feel like that's all I can handle, or else I feel, huge. So yeah, betaine HCl can help a lot of people, but a lot of people don't do well with betaine because they don't do well with methyl donors. And so in that case, if you tried something like betaine HCl and you feel horrible, you get like agitated, like your teeth are like, all of that stuff. You start getting eye twitches, muscle twitches. That can be like, the disruption of the calcium oscillations. It can be too much serotonin, because that's what you see in serotonin syndrome, for example. I found that taking fingerprint amounts of B3 under your tongue every like 15 minutes or so until the symptoms kind of start to resolve to be really helpful, because excess B3 has to be methylated. This is why I do not agree with B3 maxing, because it's like, okay, take 500 milligrams of niacinamide, for example, which, I don't always agree with niacinamide because it has to go through backup pathway and ammonia is released, and then you have to deal with the ammonia. So, sometimes I do recommend like lower dose niacin versus niacinamide. But, you take the fingerprints amounts of B3 and that excess has to be methylated. And so it takes care of those methyl donors. But betaine HCl can help a lot of people. Pancreatic enzymes can help a lot of people. Because if you don't have, again, sufficient stomach acid, or if it's not acidic enough coming into the small intestine, well, your pancreas isn't going to be like, I'm not getting the signal to like release those enzymes. And then you have bile issues too and stuff. So, I kind of always would look upstream of like, are we chewing our food 20 to 30 times per day? If possible, are you making your food? Because as you're smelling the food and stuff, that's starting the digestive process. If you're a busy mom or a busy dad or you're a working professional, at least right before you start to eat, like sit down, smell your food, take like a centering breath and like put your phone away, like eat, so there's a lot there. Anyways, what was I talking about before I got to that? I'm
not even sure. Oh, we were talking about just like the general principles. It's like what people are missing, I think.
Yeah. So, those are the things that, I always look like upstream. What are the things that we can, I was talking about sleep.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so eating enough is like, I think the most fundamental important thing when it comes to sleep so that you can sleep through the night. And then, a lot of people, they wake up at like 2 a.m. in the morning. And that's typically, in my experience, histamine, because you get the histamine dump before you get the cortisol dump. And again, that's not pathological. Like that is normal. A lot of people, I think, pathologize these things when these are normal things. Histamine is supposed to kind of like, get things going. So cortisol releases, so you have the cortisol awakening response. But if you have too much histamine, and or something going on with the receptors, because like a lot of people, if you were to test their histamine, they have histamine symptoms, but yet their histamine serum is like fine or even low, and you're like, wait, why are you having histamine issues? And so it may not be histamine, it could be sulfite, it could be glutamate, like it could be other things. But if it does seem like it's more histamine type symptoms, it's like, okay, well, are we supporting for the GI, DAO, are we, and then internally, are we supporting HNMT and NAT2? And so those, if not, and again, that just goes back to digestion again, right? So this is why digestion, sufficient stomach acid, like all that stuff is really important. So yeah, so sleep. But in general, if you wake up in the middle of the night, what I recommend is, having a red light flashlight so that you're not turning on, overhead lights, etc. Have a red light flashlight.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Eat something that is not cold. Like I wouldn't necessarily recommend like milk out of the refrigerator. But something with some carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of fat, and and then try to go back to sleep. If you can't go back to sleep, I don't recommend just like laying there, like breathing to yourself, because then you get the rumination and catastrophizing, all that stuff. I would more recommend, again, like an NSDR or a yoga nidra type thing, and see, even if you don't necessarily fall back asleep, those things are still helpful in and of themselves, like for rest and rejuvenation. The other thing is that I find, a discussion on serotonin and melatonin. So you need the main pathway that takes serotonin to melatonin, which none of the circadian gurus talk about, requires coenzyme A. And so people that tend to have an issue of converting serotonin to melatonin, I find they do really well with some pantethine, because you need B5, ALA, cysteine, and ATP to make coenzyme A. But I typically find that B5 seems to be the limiting factor for most people. So there's that. And then later in the night, to keep yourself kind of paralyzed, you need acetylcholine again. And so that's like your B5, B1, and choline, of course. So making sure you're getting enough of them. Yeah. So those are the big ones. Obviously, doing things of like, eating within an hour or so of waking up can be helpful to like set your circadian rhythm. Seeing the sun can be helpful to set your circadian rhythm before going to sleep, red lights or firelights, but that can cause other issues when it comes to like breathing in the smoke and stuff. So you have to be careful with that. Turning your phone to either red shift or even like the black and white, all those things I think are very important and very helpful. Kind of depends on like where you are, what you're doing and stuff.
What your issues are.
Yeah. And the other thing too is a warm bath or a really warm shower, or even just like a warm hand or foot bath before going to sleep can be helpful too, because when you warm up your hands and feet, that then will signal to your central nervous system to cool your body down because it thinks it's overheating. And so this is why like cooling your hands and feet acutely will cool you down, but eventually it'll warm you back up again. So sometimes, you kind of have to mess with that. But that can be helpful to go to sleep too, because right before we go to sleep, our core body temperature decreases, right? And so that can be another helpful thing. Yeah, so that's probably the big one for sleep.
Yeah. So rounding this all off, there's a lot of information there. We covered a lot.
Yeah.
So I think the big rock for you, at least, is to start. Ashley and I have coined it as gaintenance, where like we're just slowly trying to maintain, like not increase our body weight. Exactly. My stupid joke.
Yeah, I like that.
No, I'm just kidding. But really trying to slowly increase your body weight, or sorry, not increase your body weight, increase your metabolism over time, and that will hopefully help to fill in gaps in your nutrition, so you're less likely to be malnourished. Then specifically, you want to plug all those numbers in your food into something like Chronometer, which allows you to see your actual nutritional intake. And then in terms of supplementation to fix specific issues, one of the things I got from Mike Fave was that you always want to supplement with a desire to either, maybe boost cognitive performance or fix an issue, or like hopefully fix a lab marker. So maybe either supplementing to fix what you think you might be deficient in, that think you might be causing that issue, and then kind of seeing how you react to that. Is that the eagle eye view of what we talked about today, would you say?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that you should take a supplement just because someone told you that it's supposed to do this. Like if you take something and you get no effect from it, I don't really recommend continuing to take it. Like a lot of people are told take taurine or glycine or, whatever. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Like even with glycine, glucose goes to make glycine through serine. So many people are taking phosphatidylserine for cortisol issues and sleep issues and stuff like that. But it's because they're not getting enough glucose. If you just ate more, you get more. And again, like, I don't mean to be dismissive. I understand a lot of people are in a state where they're like, I'm overweight. I don't want to just eat. I don't want to put on weight. And again, that's why we are being very specific to say maintenance. You're in maintenance. Yes, like you're in maintenance. You're not putting on body fat. That is the most important thing. Okay, because it is so much harder to take it off. And you see this when people go through cuts. I also just want to like stir the pot for a second at the end here. People are talking about insulin resistance nowadays. It's like all the rage. Okay, glucose transporter 4 is the only insulin sensitive, or the only insulin
independent, right?
Yeah, insulin dependent glucose transporter. There are 14 human glucose transporters, and there's 50 sodium glucose co-transporters. Okay. If it is not about insulin in and of itself is not pathological. It's not damaging. It is necessary for life. If anything, I think that, some people need to acutely raise insulin in order to drive down lipolysis and, breaking down of their muscle tissue, so myolysis, etc. But that's like a whole nother issue. And so the question more becomes, so GLUT4 is mostly for the heart, the adipose tissue, so your fat and your muscle. GLUT1 is the universal transporter. And yes, there's affinity differences and stuff like that. But, like red blood cells do not have GLUT4. Like, the pancreas, it does not operate by using GLUT4. I believe it's GLUT2. I'd have to check. But basically, it sees glucose come in, and I believe it's GLUT2, pulls glucose in based on how much ATP is made from that glucose, is how much insulin your pancreas releases. Mm-hmm. So again, it is not insulin that's the problem. It's not glucose that's the problem. And I would also argue it's not the fatty acids, it's not the ketones, it's not the BCAAs that's the problem. It's, again, getting these things and their metabolites into the cell through the citric acid cycle and through the electron transport chain. I think that is more the issue, and that's where I would focus on personally.
Solving that missing link for what's blocking up your metabolism.
Yeah, and so, removing a macro yes, it can help because now you're like no longer having all these people kind of like competing on the freeway, basically. But you're not solving the problem. And the moment you go and eat, a full balanced meal, or, say you've been keto and you're like, I really want, I don't know, strawberries or something like that. Like now it's like, now what, So it's more about fixing those issues. And again, like maybe you don't have enough biotin, maybe you don't have enough adenosylcobalamin, and that's the reason why the BCAAs are having a hard time coming in. Or maybe you don't have enough B5 or B1, or you need biotin and manganese for pyruvate carboxylase. So, pyruvate can enter the TCA via PDH or PC. And it's like, maybe that's the issue versus, you need to just remove a major macro. So yeah, I'll just leave it there. But I think, if people are telling you it's insulin resistance, it's glucose in and of itself is not dangerous to the body. Like, I don't know where people keep coming up with this. Like, it's not. Like, I would really push back and be like, well, what about the other glucose transporters? Like, why are they not functioning? That is the issue. Why are these other glucose transporters and SGLTs not functioning? Yeah.
So, sorry, one last quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I was curious about this, and I think it's a great answer, that if you don't feel something from, let's say, taurine or glycine, like, you probably shouldn't keep taking it. Again, this could be like, it's not the right time for you, it's not the right dose, whatever it is. What's a good timeline for that? Because I don't think, let's say creatine, right? Like, should get saturated. It takes 3 weeks, give or take. Should you instantly? And I guess it's going to depend on the supplement too, but.
So again, there are a lot of people that are so removed from their body that they take some, people would get kind of upset with Dr. Pete because he would say, I tried this and I immediately had an effect. And people would be like, what are you talking about? Like, how? But you do, if you are paying attention to what's going on, you will notice a change in yourself. So, but that can be hard if you're not used to it. It's like,
it's a skill.
Yeah, it's exactly. So I would recommend, start paying attention to when I take this, or when I eat this, or when I do whatever in life. I go for a walk, or I talk to this person, or like literally whatever. How do I feel afterwards, or like during it, etc. And start to kind of correlate those things, because again, now you're getting to know yourself, and now you don't need someone else. You don't need me. You don't need Tyler. Like, you don't need anyone. You can just kind of look to yourself. Yes, like, you need some amount of education, and so there's always going to be that. But like, you can then take that information and put it through your lens, your anecdote, because it says, again, like, everything's on normal curves. And so we look at like clinical trials, supplements, et cetera, on normal curves, but, there's infinite normal curves. And if you have, if you're an outlier, sorry, I'm trying to explain. If you're like an outlier on this normal curve and you like stack up all these outliers, well, you're no longer the average anymore. You're your own unique person. So you need to pay attention to yourself and what's going on with you. And so you will get to the point where if you take something, you will notice something. If you're not there yet, when it comes to things like creatine, I think creatine can be great when you, creatine can be really helpful because it can help unload methylation. And so say you have issues with like low homocysteine and stuff like that. I would address like, why do you have low homocysteine? Like, are you just not eating enough? Are you eating more than enough protein, but you're not digesting it sufficiently? Yeah. Like, so there's so many factors that come into play with this for every single supplement. But, so I would say, like, if it's been a month and you've been taking something and you feel kind of like no effect from it, what I would do is I would choose one, and you can either choose the last thing that you started or your intuition or like whatever, and start coming off of it. I don't recommend ever going cold turkey, starting something or coming off of something, because again, these equilibrium states, but start slowly coming off of it. And if you recognize like, oh no, this was actually a positive, like I was actually getting something from this, and now that I'm coming off of it, I'm like feeling something, well then keep taking it. Like, it's obviously serving you. Or again, find that kind of minimum effective dose, minimum effective frequency. So like maybe you need half the dose that you were taking and you need it like every 3 days or something like that. That's what I would do for like all your supplements. I feel that way for all, like I am, supplements are great.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel this way about medication too. I think people are like way over medicating themselves. I think you should be only taking something as frequently and the dose that you need for it, because, you know, you are pushing pathways, you're pushing the liver that now it has to deal with these things. And even, you know, even if it's a quote beneficial thing, like, you know, like B5 or taurine or glycine or like literally whatever, it might not be beneficial for your state. And so once you get to the, you know, I do very much agree with Chris Masters on that. He seems to think that most people are just restoring their levels. And I do agree with that. Like, I don't think most of these things, if anything, is working as a pharmacologic, like supplements, your normal supplements, like the B vitamins, et cetera. Now, when we get into things like plant compounds and stuff, that's a different conversation, because obviously most of our medications are synthesized from the plant compounds. But you know, I don't think that like high dosing TTFD, for example, is working as like a pharmacologic. I think it's, you know, the reason why people have to dose it more and more and more is, well, a lot of these people are being told to not eat carbohydrates with B1 because B1 uses, carbohydrates use B1. And it's like, yes, but there's recycling systems in the body. And so if the body's not recycling these things, we need to kind of address why. And you see in a type 2 diabetic state, for example, that the kidney starts to waste the thiamine. And this just gets back to, well, it's because the B1's not getting into the cell. It's not because of the high blood glucose. It's all, they're all pointing to the same exact thing. None of these things are getting into the cell for a reason, usually because the cells are kind of backed up. That seems to be the big issue for most people. So, so I would, you know, slowly come off of things, see, was it actually helping you? Was it actually a negative? Because a lot of people also find that too, that it was a negative, that like they start backing off of supplements and they're like, oh my goodness, I feel so much better. This was like giving me major problems and stuff. And then, only keep the things that you need, you know, and don't, you know, supplements are constantly coming out. Just because a new one comes out doesn't mean you need it. Like, you know, like maybe it gives you an additional 1%. Is it worth it? For some people, yeah, it is. And that's fine. But for a lot of people, you know, I find that they are more detrimental. So again, I am for supplementation. I think a lot of people think I'm anti-supplementation. I'm very much for supplementation, but in these contexts, right? Finding what actually works for you. Not, you know, and like a lot of, you know, I work with a lot of people and talk to a lot of people who we're told to start thyroid and progesterone. And like, that's a whole nother conversation too, because like people start taking these things and at first they get a benefit from it, right? Like their temperature increases, you know, blood pressure comes in line, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden you start to notice that they're not getting the same benefit from this anymore. And it's now becoming actually a negative for them. And there's a lot of people, you know, Dr. Broda Barnes was well aware of this, but you need sufficient cortisol signaling for thyroid response. And, you know, that's not pathological. That is normal, you know? And a lot of people will take thyroid and enter adrenal crisis, adrenal insufficiency, whether it's primary, secondary, tertiary territory. And that's dangerous, you know? And so that's not at all the first, I would never recommend thyroid first, personally. Not until you address these other things, you know? So, and same thing with progesterone. Like Dr. Kathleen Dalton, there's a reason why she said that, you know, her patients were eating starch like every 4 hours. And it's, again, because in this case, the cortisol is acting as a progesterone receptor antagonist. And so you need to lower cortisol sufficiently, which you need insulin to do. So again, we need insulin. And for the progesterone to work. But again, so many women are not eating enough, especially not enough carbohydrates. And so then you give progesterone and they feel worse, or they don't get any effect from it. Or at first they get a positive effect and then they feel horrible from it. So there's so much nuance with a lot of these things that those would not be the first compounds I would look at. Personally, I would again look at what do we need to get through glycolysis, beta oxidation, alpha oxidation, citric acid cycle, electron transport chain, and then go from there. Wow. Yeah.
Well, Kathleen, that was a great way to wrap it up. You are a wealth of knowledge and you have a very refreshing perspective. I'm very happy it's being brought into the pro-metabolic sphere, whatever you want to call it here, and really appreciate you taking time. Everyone go buy Kathleen a coffee. I will link it in the description, and make sure to check out our Substack. I'll link all of her stuff there and her Instagram. But Kathleen, any last words?
I think that was a lot. If there's any questions, please let us know. Maybe we can do like a Q&A next or something like that. So
that'd be a lot of fun. I would love to have you back on. All right, thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, and everyone else. Thanks for coming on. Talk to you guys next time. Be good.
Thank you, Tyler.